talk on Lent we're going to have later, and I know it seems a little bit late in the game. We really only have 5 days left of Lent because it ends this Friday night. So don't get confused. Easter isn't next Sunday. Lent ends at the end of Lent, which is Lazarus Saturday, and will be Friday night. Then we start Holy Week, because the Byzantines always like to make things longer and harder and more painful, right? So we have 40 days of Lent, and then we have an entire Holy Week break, which actually was the original Holy Week, the original Lent. So what we have during the Great Fast, we're encouraged to increase our prayer, our fasting, and almsgiving. And that's going to help us realize and get to the resurrection, that holy day which is the foundation of our faith. And it's going to help us become better people. It's going to have a better Pascha. But also something in the gospel today we're going to learn about what it says. So increasing our prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, it's an exercise that allows us to pay more attention and take the attention away from us and start focusing it on others. Our frame of mind is when we can take an honest look at ourselves. And we don't want to look at ourselves in the mirror or by ourselves and look at ourselves as how others see us. Because some of us are very good actors. We're very good at going to school or to work or to church and acting and behaving like whatever we want to act like. We have to honestly look at ourselves as God sees us, because God knows how we really, really are. Like an examination of conscience we do before partaking of the holy mystery of holy reconciliation, confession. We have to look at ourselves and think, yeah, we really need forgiveness. And that's not an easy thing to do. We have to be like the woman in the gospel today, the sinful woman we talked about, that came in and right away she was put down and Jesus forgave her sins. She was the one that knew exactly who she was and what she had done. She knew that she had forgiveness. Meanwhile, the Pharisee Simon was one of those that thinks to himself, well, I've done nothing wrong. I'm holy and righteous. I am in no need of forgiveness. And the lesson that we learned from the gospel today is that through the forgiveness that they were given, regardless of the sin, there's always something that happens in return. So when we have prayer, fasting, and almsgiving, it helps us get to the point where we allow God into our lives, into our minds, realize that we need forgiveness, ask for the forgiveness, and also forgive others. And what does Jesus say happened because of that? And he gives this parable. And what he's basically saying is, regardless of the sin, you can be forgiven. But depending on the enormity of the sin, then your thanks will be equal to that. So the more sin you get, you're forgiven, the more thanksgiving, the more that you're so happy about it. And what does that return? It returns love. So while people are forgiving you, and while you're forgiving them, we see this whole thing with prayer, fasting, almsgiving, forgiveness, all coming back to a much more loving society. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to Him forever.
We will begin with prayer. We're going to have that be just a little bit delayed, and I'm going to give you the reason why we're going to do that. Anybody do any hobbies here, woodworking or anything like that? If you've ever made a chair or stool, we made a bunch of chairs, some stools for church. The challenge with those is they have 4 legs. The 4 legs have to hit the floor at the same time. It's easier said than done. Now, if you switch to a 3-legged stool, now it won't rock, as long as the legs are fairly close to each other. But if one of them gets really long, it'll start to lean. Gets long enough, short enough, or missing at all, it completely falls over. So one missing or one short, one's not doing its job, the whole falls apart. That's my little analogy for prayer, fasting, and almsgiving. But the 3 need to go together to work as a team. And when one of them is short, generally it's the almsgiving part. You know, we talk about prayer and fasting. The more painful one, I think, is the almsgiving, maybe. So, they need to go together.
So I would like to start out with a prayer. And the prayer that we do during Lent is the prayer of St. Ephrem. The wonderful thing about St. Ephrem's prayer, and a little bit aggravating part of St. Ephrem's prayer, is that I see different versions of it. We really don't have different versions of the Lord's Prayer. Maybe a little bit. Debtors, trespasses. But St. Ephrem prayer, and the way we do it, we're going to read it right out of what our pre-sanctified book is. Okay, so I'm going to read it, and I am going to prostrate, because at the bottom of each stanza, there is a little word that says prostration. So for those who are able to do it, if not, you can just do whatever you like. Father, Son, and Holy Spirit, born and master of life, spare me from the spirit of indifference, despair, lust, power, and idol. Instead, bestow on me, your servant, the spirit of integrity, humility, patience, and love. Just, O Lord and King, let me see my own sins, and not judge my brothers and sisters, for you are blessed forever and ever. Every year the floor gets a little bit farther away from me, it seems. We did this, the Great Canon of St. Andrew the Crete, singing the Crete, on Wednesday. Usually it's taken on Thursday. That one, if you go and stay for the whole time, you can really do enough prostrations to last a lifetime or last a year. It's a challenge. It's a beautiful service. So this prayer, what I'd like to do, instead of talking about prayer in general, is I'm going to analyze of this very prayer. So this prayer is divided into three parts. The first part describes the undesirable spirit in four qualities. The second part describes a desirable spirit in four qualities. And the third part completes the prayer with a movement into the incarnation of what Great Lent is all about. All right, so let's just take this three parts. So line 1, phrase 1, spirit of indifference, idleness, often translated as sloth, but the original understanding was a total lack of any capacity to act. It's not just laziness, but it's a demonic inability essentially to live, to be productive in any way, especially in one's spiritual life. Line 1, word 2, phrase 2, spirit of despair, meaning to be perplexed, to be overcome by a sense of futility or defeat, or being a Detroit Lions fan. I'm sorry, I wasn't a Slayer fan. Thank God for the Detroit Lions, because as a Browns fan, we're always rooting for you to lose. So we're the only ones not in the Super Bowl, too. But if we remember where we are headed to the resurrection, the ultimate victory of Christ, the same victory that can be ours, if we really believe in this, then we would never despair. Phrase 3, spirit of love for power, the hunger to control things, the desire to be in control, to be in power. This is obviously a temptation of pride, believing that we know best and we need to be in control of everything. Now, I'm not going to speak for the ladies here, but I think that's a real guy thing. How many guys here like to be in control? At work, is anybody in control, or is anybody just, the peon like me? Okay. Sometimes we like to be in control like that, and we have to be careful. You're called to be leaders. We're all called to be leaders. But what we have here is this lust for power, this love of power. And that's where we can get into a little bit of trouble. So phrase 4, and my favorite, the spirit of idle chatter. Basically the makeup of these Greek words, that means no work words. Speech that achieves no work. Sitting around, running our mouths for no reason other than to hear ourselves speak. And this idle chatter is covered in Matthew 12:36. But I tell you that every careless word that people speak, they shall give as an accounting for it on the day of judgment. Imagine every word, idle chatter that you ever uttered going to be held accountable for. I think that's pretty scary. The second part of this event from prayer, here we ask God to grant us the qualities of a desirable and penitential spirit. You dwell on just how far you think you have strayed from God. Have you ever been in Lake Erie, which is very close to you and to me? We're kind of united by a body of water. We probably could have gotten faster by boat, right? Maybe. If you've ever been in the water and you've sat, and there's maybe a buoy that's your sense of direction, and you just sit on a raft or something like that, maybe you fall asleep or something like that, and you wake up and you realize, oh my gosh, Detroit's way over there, and I'm way over here. When did that happen? You don't even realize you feel yourself drifting. Another analogy for how we drift away from God and don't even realize it. It's almost effortless. I can't even feel it. Then we see something like the beach is way over there, and we realize we've got to come back to it. That's what we should be doing during Lent, seeing how far we've strayed from God and saying, what do we need to do to get back to Him? We ask for 4 qualities: the spirit of integrity, of honesty, of truthfulness. I had a lot written here, but I crossed it out because I wanted to make the youth, ask a youth, a young woman here, do we know, have you grown up with the spirit of honesty and truthfulness around you? Or do you have amongst you the ability to have so much untruth brought into your life? When my children turn in a book report to school, they have to use a website called turnitin.com. And it is a website that you turn in the text of the report that checks for what? How good your paper is? No, it checks for plagiarism. Because it's so easy to plagiarize. Heck, when I was plagiarizing my way through school, I mean, when I was going through school, and if I wanted to plagiarize, I had to type it or write it myself. I had to copy it. Wow, now it's just copy and paste, take a picture, right? It's easy. The internet is so full of untruths. It's incredible. The amount of information you get, the amount of misinformation you get. And when you hear someone, and one of my favorite shows is Hogan's Heroes. Colonel Hogan would always say, I give you my word as an officer and a gentleman. Do you know what that even means? Does anybody stand on their word anymore? Oh, I give him my word. Great. He gave me his word. It's the gospel, right? We lie ourselves like crazy. We have presidential candidates that you have to have, but afterwards they have to have fact checkers that tell you what was true and what was not that they told you. It's incredible. Humility. The spirit of humility is a petition, our asking that our minds voluntarily choose the way of humility. Voluntarily. Of moderation and self-control. Patience. Patience arises from humility. St. Isaac the Syrian wrote this: in proportion to your humility, you are given patience in your affliction. I really had to think about that for a while. In proportion to your humility, you are given patience in your affliction. You really should write that down and think about that. It takes a while for that to sink in. Very wise words right there. That we are given this ability by God. But it's a matter of waiting. It's a matter of trying. It's not just instant results, instant gratification. When you see things the way they truly are, and you do it deliberately, then there are never any reasons for stress or impatience. We know that God is in control, that His will is best, and in submitting ourselves to this, we naturally should become patient. Again, we want to be in control of things. We want to be in charge. We want to be able to put things in order as we want to. Right? But But that's not always what God's will is for us. Thy will be done, where we're conforming to God's will. And when it doesn't happen, we can be impatient. Love. The English language uses love in a lot of different ways and different meanings. And you can love your car, you can love sushi, you can love your wife. It's not exactly the same. It's a difficult word to say. I might be able to say to this woman, I love you, right? Because I do. Because she's a Christian human being, and I do. But I don't love her like the woman over there who I've been married to for almost 33 years. It's not the same thing. So love is a tough word in the English language. For the Greeks, they used other words, and they had a few, 3 or 4. And the love that we're talking about here is agape. The defining characteristic of a desirable Christian soul is love. And specifically, we ask here for agape, the love of God. So the third and final sentence of the Saint Prayer Ephraim is a culmination of what Great Lent is all about. The final phrase, let me see my own sins. Let me see myself as God sees us, as God sees me, like I said today in the homily. Is that really something that we want to see? Or is that something that we want to deny? Is that really something that we want to show other people? This morning there were a couple of young girls here, and I asked them, when you're in school, are they really showing their real selves? And take yourself back to junior high or high school and how we had to act. Those guys who weren't naturally cool tried to act like the other cool guys. And the one thing I regret from high school is that I never really acted honestly as myself. I think I'd go back now and think, oh yeah, I'm just being myself. But then none of the girls, like guys, acted like themselves. They liked the cool girls, and that's what I was trying to do, you know. So we weren't honest. And we're not honest. And we grow up as adults, and we're not completely honest. But you have to be honest with God, because He knows what you're really like. We get up in the morning, we prepare ourselves to be seen in public physically, right? How many of you just get right out of bed and go to work? Okay, not working from home. Okay, I do that. In my robe, right? And I turn the video off, right? I went to a woman's house at lunch. I do a handyman work on the side. Went to her house, and she literally answered the door at noon in her robe. And I thought, okay, I really shouldn't be seeing this, but that's what she was comfortable wearing. But how many people go right from there out to work? We don't. We prepare ourselves in all kinds of different ways. As we see ourselves truly and completely as we are, and only when we can honestly look at ourselves and notice and recognize our sin, can we begin to achieve the mind of Christ. So there's go to confession, a holy mystery of holy reconciliation. And you must put yourselves in a state of mind to say, I do need forgiveness. That's a humbling thing to do. And not judge my brothers and sisters. Seeing ourselves in our sin leads naturally to not judging others. It is when we think that we are without sin that we look down upon others in judgment. When you're getting ready for confession, you ever think to yourself, well, why would you go to confession? I don't know a sin. I know that Father Joe's probably heard that from the older people of his parish. Because, Father, I'm just sitting at home. I'm not doing anything anyway. I'm not sinning. Yeah, well, that's partly true, but you can ask him, well, what have you not done? You know, what about your thoughts? What about, the way you're talking? There's a lot of sin to be done, even when you're old. There's a lot of recognizing it, and a lot of need for forgiveness. And this is really the point of everything we do for Great Lent, to soften ourselves, to make ourselves receptive to the grace of God, so He can show us where we are and how to move to where He wants us to be. So as we continue to pray to this prayer of St. Ephrem of Syrian this last week of Lent, I encourage all of us to really think about the words that we're saying. And don't just dread it in the next prostration that's coming up. Meditate on the things we're praying to be kept from and praying to be given. And in doing this, we'll begin to see ourselves in the way that Christ sees us. So much to be said about prayer. The ladies in Fremont just had an entire weekend, and the topic was prayer. There's so much to be said about it. So this is just a little bit of an analysis of the great saying from prayer. Now we go on to fasting. And in the Eastern Church, the Eastern tradition, fasting is not seen as a giving up, or somebody telling you and taking something away from you. You know, some favorite food, or it is instead reminding ourselves that we have how much we need to return to paradise, return to where we were, and how sin has taken that away. For the same reason, fasting should be accompanied with more intense prayer and almsgiving. Remember the three-legged stool. They all come together. So when we fast, we should have a positive attitude toward it. How many people even think like that? That, oh, great, Lent's coming up. I can't wait to start fasting. Can't wait to start doing all this extra stuff. You should be rejoicing and saying, this is my opportunity to get closer to God. But you know, that's not how the rest of the year goes. I will admit, going without meat and dairy for an entire 8 weeks. On the way home from Holy Saturday last year, I stopped at George's Gyros and bought the biggest gyro I could possibly eat. I thought, what did I do this for? Well, I've been away from it for 8 weeks. But you know what? I got to see myself as saying, well, maybe I didn't grow from all that. Maybe I didn't really learn anything. Really, that gyro was calling me for 8 weeks. I gave in. Maybe this year I'll be a little stronger. And we live stronger by listening to some of these quotes from the booklet from Bishop Theodore Rocha on it. And I'll read this to you. The fast offers us a mystical banquet and invites us to partake abundantly. For food, let us take the immortal gifts of the Holy Spirit. And for drink the tears of contrition, offering joyously to God our unending praise. Let us purify ourselves by prayer and fasting, and let us serve God by caring for the poor. With souls purified by fasting, let us bow before the cross on which Christ our Savior was nailed. Behold, this is a time of grace and beauty. The glorious day is brilliant with fasting. Let us hasten, O faithful, to purify ourselves, that we may appear without stain before the Creator. This glorious day is brilliant with fasting. Oh man! Again, that's a lot to learn, a lot to work on, to think that the day is brilliant with fasting. We see fasting so much as what we're being denied. It's not what the church is trying to do. We are, after all, called to live in this world, but not of this world. And when I went and got that gyro, I really felt myself becoming of this world, because I thought, that's really what I need to get right now, because I've denied myself so long, I deserve that gyro. Right? That's not the point. I missed it last year. We set aside all earthly cares as we sing in our liturgy, which is supposed to extend beyond this 1 hour a week that we're here. The late Father Alexander Schmemann was the Orthodox priest who taught at the seminary. He said that we receive the gift of food from God, and because it is a gift of life, we see it as the very gift of God from God. Therefore, we are filled with the divine life itself. Now, we all know, of course, the story of Adam and Eve. They were given everything from God, and they were told one thing, to not partake of this one item. Now, everybody maybe has children here, maybe not, but if you were all kids at one time, if you ever saw something that said, and this was at the retreat sign last week, there was a sign, I don't know why it was there, but it annoyed me enough, and it said, no smoking on the patio. Now this is a building, it's a giant building, and acres of land there. But they had one sign that said, don't smoke on the patio. What was the very first thing I wanted to do? Was go out on that patio and light up a cigar. Why? Because that's the tendency that we have. Because we're being told not to do it. Don't walk on the grass. That's the first thing I want to do. Maybe not all of you. It's okay. I want to listen to that. So we're not being just denied something, but Adam and Eve saw that and were tempted. The big mistake they made is that they thought that by having that which was forbidden, they could liberate themselves from God. They could be as God, but in the end it resulted in them and us becoming something other than what God intended. We have become slaves to food. We have become slaves to the world. And we still have the lingering effects of the sin of our first parents. But from them we can learn the lesson that it is from God that we receive forgiveness. We receive recreation, salvation, the resurrection. It is from the image here, it is from Jesus Christ that we receive the salvation to correct what our first parents did, bringing sin into the world and causing everything that's wrong. In our paradoxical Eastern church, we use food not only to live so that we can become more like God, but we abstain from food to do the very same thing. Well, that makes a lot of sense. Now, that's completely backward. That's completely contradictory. And that's the wonderful thing about it. So there's two types of fasting. The total fast and the ascetical fast. The total fast refers to a usually short-lived fast from all food and drink. And Father Schmemann says this: it is the necessary preparation for the messianic banquet at Christ's table in his kingdom. See, this is why these guys got the right books and I don't. Because they write like this. It says the necessary preparation for the messianic banquet at Christ's table in his kingdom. Wow. The total fast used to be the night before receiving Holy Eucharist. Who's here old enough to remember that? Yeah. Wasn't that long ago? What is it now? What's it been trimmed down to now, Father Repko?
Hopefully 1 hour.
1 hour, right. Well, unless you're snacking on something during liturgy, you're not going to get communion in about an hour. How hard is that? Not hard at all. The total fast has to do with the rhythm we have in our church of preparation and fulfillment. We're all about that. We never jump into anything in our church without big-time preparation. And Lent is, of course, the biggest. But we have other times, and we'll talk about that soon. We prepare for things, and then we have it, and then we keep talking about it. We say Christ is risen in a couple of weeks. How many more weeks after that do we continue with that? If people came in off the street, and it was 3 weeks after Easter, we were still singing Christ is risen, we said, what are you doing? We're celebrating Easter, Pascha. And I said, well, that was 3 weeks ago. Imagine people saying Happy New Year to you 3 weeks after January 1st. But that's what we do. We are most ready to receive His Holy Eucharist when we emptied our bodies and our minds of all that is otherwise cluttered. But for many of you, and it's not always easy, you could come to church and communion would be the very first food in which you partake. That's the ideal. If you're not able to do it physically, then don't do it. We would rather have you eat something than picking you off the floor on your way up to communion. Okay? As Father Schmemann said, the church, the body of Christ, that's us, keeps a watch for the bridegroom and waits for him with readiness, anticipation, and joy. So it is not just the individual members of the church that fast, but the church as a whole. When my kids used to be on the swim team, swimming is a very individual effort, especially if you have like a relay or guys go up there and swim and the girls. But in the end, they add up all the scores together and you win as a team. But it's a very selfish thing when you're out there trying only for yourself in swimming. Basketball's not like that. Basketball, you've got a constant move around. You're setting picks for the guy. You're doing things together as a team, almost simultaneously. But swimming reminds me of this. As individuals in the church, if you're a good individual swimmer, and the next guy tries his darndest, and he's a good swimmer, you have a better team. That's how we are Lent. Lent is an individual journey, but we all do it together. And if we're stronger individuals, we become a stronger church. So the other type of fasting is the ascetical fast. This act refers to the abstaining from foods for a certain time, food and drink, and specific times of years. Father Schmeling says that we fast to liberate ourselves from the unlawful tyranny of the flesh. Fast to liberate ourselves from the unlawful tyranny of the flesh. Imagine being able to handle this tyranny of the flesh that torments us by fasting. We have control of it, yet we don't think we do. But the church gives us a way to do that. Most people see fasting as a punishment, not something that's going to help us. It is a necessity by its very nature, a long and sustained effort. Father Schmeling continues by saying that much time it is needed since it takes time to support and heal the universal disease which humankind has come to consider a normal state. We are invited several times of the year to purify and liberate ourselves from the dominion of the flesh by the holy therapy of fasting. That's incredible words. He sees it in such a positive and real light coming over this. Liberate ourselves from the dominion of the flesh by the holy therapy of fasting. Wow. Why in the world would anyone ever want to minimize that which can help us in such a way? So the Eastern Church has set aside the following prescribed fasting times. I'll list these in not any particular order. Every Friday, unless some important feast takes precedence over the feasts. In the early church, Wednesday was also included in the weekly fast for meat, because it was the day in which they conspired to have Jesus put to death, and Friday because it was the day of his crucifixion. And I'm sure people will say to me, as people have said to me at work, well, Vatican II came along, that all changed. Okay, it did not. Right? If you want to look at the Catechism of the Catholic Church, including the Eastern Church, the canon in the Catholic Church, 1250 and 1251, specifically state all Fridays throughout the year, in times of Lent, and such a day, never went away. What they did is they said, Paul VI said, if you're not going to have meat on Friday, you can substitute that with something else. Has anybody seen the list that Paul VI put together for that? When you see that list, you'll say, order me the fish. I'm not interested in doing all those other things. Because they're not easy. They're very difficult. The other times prescribed on fasting in the Eastern Church. Great Lent, 40 days of Lent, which we will complete this Friday evening. Lent starts from Sunday evening, and the only way I can relate it is before the Wednesday of Ash Wednesday. Because if you look up on Google, what's the first day of Lent, it immediately says Ash Wednesday. We're not included in that. We're a couple of days before, so Sunday evening starts then, it goes through consecutively, including Sundays, to last for Saturday. Holy Week being separate from the 40 days. Holy Week. In the East, again, this is not part of Lent, but it was the original Lent just that week. And the church decided to add 40 days for Lent. The Eastern Church saying, we'll just tack it on to because we like to do things longer. Right? The Christmas fast, which we call Philip's fast, November 15th through December 24th. Do not confuse this with what the Latin Church calls Advent, which they either go 2 weeks or 4, I think, sometimes. Ours is 40 days. We like that number. And the fast is, of course, very hard because what are we doing before Christmas of all things? We surely aren't fasting. Enough food. That's one of the biggest food bashes. I mean, at work it was so difficult to go in and see all that food there. No, I'm fasting. I can't do that. The fast of the Theotokos, August 1st through the 14th. Right in the midst of the cookout season. I got the grill going. I got to go 2 weeks with them. Oh gosh, so hard. The fast of the Holy Apostles, the Monday after All Saints' Day through June 28th. The elevation of the Holy Cross, September 14th. The Eve of Theophany, which I believe is strict fast, January 5th. The beheading of St. John the Baptist, August 29th. So we have other times to fast. It's not just Lent. So why do we fast? Why bother? Well, Mother Spencer comes up with pretty good reasons to do it. Well, we find some evidence in the Bible. Matthew 4:2. And Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. And after he fasted 40 days and 40 nights, this was Jesus fasting, 40 days and 40 nights. He then became hungry. And the tempter came and said to him, if you are the Son of God, command that these stones become bread. But he answered from Scripture and said, it is written, man shall not live on bread alone, but on every word that proceeds out of the mouth of God. So Jesus is fasting. He gives us the example. And not only did he give us the example to fast, what is it that Jesus did right after this encounter with Satan? What was he preparing to do? Does anybody know what he did right after this? He was preparing to start his ministry. Right? He was getting ready for the fight, for the 3-year fight. He's like an athlete getting ready. I mean, I always thought I could run a marathon, but if I tried right now, there's no way. I'd make it to my car. That'd be it. I'm done. But every day I can do a little bit more, right? What I can do is run right into that. Jesus was all about preparation. He did it by fasting. Jesus rated himself in the best way he could by preparing his body and his mind, by emptying himself from all distraction. That is what fasting should be for us, to empty ourselves from all that pollutes our bodies and minds and keeps God out. Fasting and prayer make us more sensitive to God's personal presence. It allows us to have a bit more quiet time and allow God in. When God is quiet, that's when it is quiet, that's when God is allowed to come in. We are filled with distractions during our day. God doesn't power his way into your life. He very well could. He could be louder than any earphones you have, any street noise, and anything else. But he doesn't. He waits for the quiet. And that's when he's able to come in. Fasting should be undertaken honestly, willing, and not by compulsion, pressure, force, or God forbid, obligation. In Matthew 17, the gospel, you remember, the person that had an affliction, and they said, we went to your apostles and they couldn't do anything about it. And what did Jesus say? Oh, don't worry, you're okay. Here's a participation trophy. Good job, right? Jesus didn't say anything like that ever. He said something like, how long do I have to live with your perverse lot of good-for-nothing people, right? My words. He was not happy. And he said, don't you know this one only comes out by prayer and fasting, right? You'd think those apostles would know. They hung around this guy all day, for years. Why did they get it? We get it. Or at least we have it right here in front of us. And we can get it. Learn from their mistakes. Learn from what Jesus taught you. It's right there. So how should we carry ourselves when we fast? Again, you're out in public, you're at work. I used to travel at work. We would go out for lunch, and you'd have a bunch of guys, and it was Lent, and I thought, oh, here comes lunch, what am I going to do? Because I know they're not going to have anything that I can eat, you know. And bring me the crackers and a couple pieces of lettuce, please. And everybody else is eating, you know. I went to lunch with a friend during Lent, and he ordered buffalo wings during Lent. I'm a sinful man. Buffalo wings are my kryptonite. And there they were right in front of me. Oh. I thought, no, I'm better than that now. I can do it. But that's what we have to do. And we don't want to be in your face about that. I'm kind of like the Pharisee, pound your chest, you know. I'm more of a holy guy than doing fasting. I can't eat that. Just need to say that. Paul's epistle on fasting covers this. Paul's epistle. When you fast, do not put on a gloomy face, as the hypocrites do, for they neglect their appearance so that they will be noticed by men when they are fasting. Truly I say to you, they have their reward in full. But you, when you anoint your head and wash your face so that your fasting will not be noticed by men, but by your Father who is in secret, And your Father who sees what is done in secret will reward you. So we don't need to go around broadcasting the fact that we are righteous and we are fasting and we're better than the other people. Not easy to do it, without somebody finding out. So a lot has been said about fasting and its origin and its meaning, how we should do it, how we're prescribed to do it in the Eastern Church, and what some of the church fathers thought about it. Father Shem. As with praying, fasting is an act that must be done privately and together with the other faithful. Again, individually work on efforts to become a better whole, a better parish, a better eparchy, a better church. And now the third one is almsgiving. This is there's a tendency sometimes, especially during the fast, to focus a great deal on increasing prayer and fasting, as we should. But one of these practices we cannot leave out is almsgiving. And I don't know if it's because the third one we always mention, or it's the hardest one to do, or the easiest one to not do, I don't know. While we are conditioned from a very early age to find it so hard to let go of our treasures, Christ teaches us that this is exactly how we can find great joy. Some of you have children, young children, have grandkids, and you even knew you did this yourself, but there were certain toys that, those mine. Somebody threatens to take that away. Right? When I was in kindergarten, it's funny how these memories stick in your head forever. I can't remember what I had for lunch yesterday. See? But 5 years old, coming in, and Joe would always get this we had those wooden toys back then, And he had this great dump truck. It was this big dump truck. And I never got there early enough to get that dump truck. I always wanted it. And one day, I got there early and Joe wasn't there yet, and I grabbed it. And he came in and he started crying. He said, "That's my dump truck." I thought, well, it's not his dump truck, and I beat you to it. Right? So even at that early age, he's already like, "That's mine. I don't want anybody to take something from me. That's my treasure. I'm not going to give it up." How would he find any joy? He didn't say, "Oh, look at that. He's playing with my dump truck. Go ahead." While we are conditioned, So, why are we asked to give alms? What good does that do? Especially like during my life. The Archangel Raphael says in the book of Tobit, chapter 12, prayer with fasting is good, but better than both is almsgiving with righteousness. A little with righteousness is better than wealth with wrongdoing. It is better to give up alms than to lay up gold, for almsgiving saves from death and purges away every sin. Those who give alms will enjoy a full life. Again, we're conditioned about possessions, about what we're worth, about how other people see us. When they come to see their house, they come to say, "Come over to my house. What are you doing?" "Oh, no, can't come over to my house. Got to clean up first, got to make it look better," right? Because we know about presentation. Almsgiving is probably the least talked about of the three. If we look at this only as a call for us to give more of our money, then it becomes something that we'd rather not hear. We need more money. Give more money to the poor. Right? Sure, there are things that are always needed and can be solved by more revenue. Financial statements from most parishes are usually a tough thing to see. How many people are on the finance council here? Anybody? You look forward to seeing the financial statement every year, right? At the end of the year. I don't know how it is in this church, but I know that one of the parishes that I saw the financial statement was not something we wanted to see. It was terrible, and that's the reality of it. What are you going to do about it? Financial statements. In the gospel that speaks about the final judgment of God separating the goats from the sheep, it is based on what we did for others and what we did not do for others. When Lazarus is there in the bosom of Abraham and the rich man is enduring the flames of hell, it was all about what the rich man says, what did I do? What did I do to Lazarus? We didn't do anything to him. That's the problem. That's the point. It's what you don't do also that can be a problem. Our almsgiving does not have to and really should not be something that we let others know about. Don't be like the Pharisee, standing back there, pounding his breast, talking about how great he was, how much money he gave. It is not important how we are perceived by others, but more importantly, how we can answer the question, how do we look in God's eyes? The 26th chapter of Matthew, verse 11, the poor you will always have with you, but you will not always have me. He really was right, wasn't he? We know that we have those who are far less fortunate than us. And we know that we as Christians should not ignore them or pass them on to some government program. We see how well those have worked over the years. In the days of St. John Chrysostom, it was the church that took care of the poor, the sick, the widows, and the elderly. Giving alms in support of them can, of course, be through monetary donations, but it can be also part of your efforts. Like I mentioned, I started when the pandemic hit and we all got sent home. And everybody at work assumed you had this great setup at home to do on the internet. So it was driving me nuts being home 24/7. I don't know about the rest of you, but I love my wife and family. But being at home all day and night was a new thing for me. There was no going away and then having excitement coming home. It was just you were home. So I started going out at lunchtime, doing something, just getting out of the house. And there was a couple of jobs that were around the neighborhood to do as handyman work, which I can do. And I do jobs that nobody else really wants to do. And one job, there was a woman wanted her one fence post that the snowplow guy knocked over, and I replaced one fence post for her. And after I got done, I said, it's $20. And she kind of just looked at me funny, and she went in the house and she gave me $50. Okay? Well, was I giving alms or was she? I was giving her my talent, my time, and doing something for her, and trying not to charge her much. And she gave me some money. I think that's a win-win situation. So maybe you get paid for something that you do, but I think she got a lot more than $20 or even $50 would have got, because nobody else was coming over to do that one stupid little job. And that's what I like to do. Help people out. And then they give me a few bucks for it. But that's something that you're doing when you use your talent, whatever it might be. Almsgiving should be, first of all, having you think about exactly who is in need. You know, think, am I really in need, or maybe there's somebody else around me that's much more in need than me? Family, friend, your neighbor, people at work. Right? We just lost a dear friend of mine. 30 years I knew him at work, and he died 60 years old. And now he has a wife and 3 kids. His wife doesn't work, and he has three older kids. What are they going to do? I think she probably never thought of that, asked that question. At 60, he's going to be gone. So there's people raising money for her, trying to help her out. You can help people who are not directly connected to your own life. People that you help through donations or food pantry, or other people that you may never see. Contributing to a GoFundMe page, sending money to Ukraine, buying paper products for Deacon Robert, who runs the hospitality house in Parma, Ohio, Cleveland area. You can always use funds and paper products and plates and things like that. In this time when the church invites us particularly to practice mercy, consider supporting special efforts or groups like our seminary. You can sponsor a seminarian. These men who go off to study, and we'll be delighted to know that they're still remembered. Because when they go off, and there's a couple here that had one of their sons go off to the seminary. And maybe they kept in contact with him, but I'm sure he felt that he was out there and people kind of forgot about him. You know? Send him a card, send him a well wishes, put $10 in it, you know, help him out. Other parishes, our parishes are full of people who say this. Father Joe, you should, and it trails off from there, okay? My pastor, Father Mike, said these were the you should people in our parish. Okay? All good ideas are welcomed. Like, I would really like to put a wall there where the cantor's stand is, and wall this off, and make the church a little smaller, and more of a classroom vestibule. That's what I want to do. In fact, I'm going to stay here this week and build this wall. Does anybody have any objections to that? That's a good idea, and I think Father Joe should get right on it, right? That's not what a cleric really wants to hear. A cleric really wants to hear this. You know, Father Joe, that wall, you know what, another thing, I would love, if I lived here, I would love putting another couple of tiers on your icon screen. Wouldn't that be wonderful? All the way up to the ceiling. And I'm going to do it. I'm going to pay for it, I'm going to find a carpenter, and I'm going to do it. You don't have to do anything. That's almsgiving. Suggesting Father Joe do it because it needs to be higher. Well, anybody can do that. Practice charity by sharing the gift of your faith, inviting others to join us for liturgy, or maybe an online class such as the God With Us series that I watch. Another way is that your alms is to transfer some of your example and wisdom to our youth, to be a mentor for them. There's a guy sitting here today that has been a mentor of mine for 30 years or more. He doesn't even know it. Sometimes it just works that way. Showing our youth the beauty of our visiting Catholic faith, guiding them in praying and singing and just being for them when they need you. So, ladies and gentlemen, brothers and sisters in Christ, we only have until Friday evening before our Lenten journey ends. As my former pastor used to say to the faithful, usually about 3 weeks in, that some of you have not even, possibly even begun your Lenten journey or made any efforts toward Pascha. But it's not too late to start. It's not too late to think about next year. So hopefully there has been something here that spoke to you just a bit, and as you're thinking about how you might even have a better Lent next year. Glory to Jesus Christ.
Glory to him.